Good morning. Crito by Plato. Socrates speaking. Serious thinkers, I believe, have always held some such view as the one which I mentioned just now, that some of the opinions which people entertain should be respected, and others should not. Now I ask you, Crito, don't you think that this is a sound principle? You are safe from the prospect of dying tomorrow, in all human probability, and you are not likely to have your judgment upset by this impending calamity. Consider then, don't you think that this is a sound enough principle, that one should not regard all the opinions that people hold, but only some and not others? What do you say? Isn't that a fair statement? Crito. Yes, it is. In other words, one should regard the good ones and not the bad. Yes. The opinions of the wise being good and the opinions of the foolish bad. Naturally. To pass on then, what do you think of the sort of illustration that I used to employ? When a man is in training and taking it seriously, does he pay attention to all praise and criticism and opinion indiscriminately, or only when it comes from the one qualified person, the actual doctor or trainer? Only when it comes from the one qualified person. Then he should be afraid of the criticism and welcome the praise of the one qualified person, but not those of the general public. Obviously, public. I don't know. So he ought to regulate his actions and exercises and eating and drinking by the judgment of his instructor, who has expert knowledge, rather than by the opinions of the rest of the public. Yes, that is so. Very well. Now, if he disobeys the one man and disregards his opinion and commendations, and pays attention to the advice of the many who have no expert knowledge, surely he will suffer some bad effect. Certainly. And what is this bad effect? Where is it produced? I mean, in what part of the disobedient person? His body, obviously. That is what suffers. Very good. Well now, tell me, Crito, we don't want to go through all the examples one by one. Does this apply as a general rule, and above all, to the sort of actions which we are trying to decide about? Just and unjust, honorable and dishonorable, good and bad? Ought we to be guided and intimidated by the opinion of the many, or by that of the one, assuming that there is someone with expert knowledge? Is it true that we ought to respect and fear this person more than all the rest put together, and that if we do not follow his guidance or her guidance, we shall spoil and mutilate the part of us which, as we used to say, is improved by right conduct and destroyed by wrong? Or is this all nonsense? No, I think it is true, Socrates. Then consider the next step. There is a part of us which is improved by healthy actions and ruined by unhealthy ones. If we spoil it by taking the advice of non-experts, will life be worth living when this part is once ruined? The part I mean is the body. Do you accept this? Yes. Well, is life worth living with a body which is worn out and ruined in health? Certainly not. What about the part of us which is mutilated by wrong actions and benefited by right ones? Is life worth living with this part ruined? Or do we believe that this part of us, whatever it may be, in which right and wrong operate, is of less importance than the body? Certainly not. it is really more precious. Much more. In that case, my dear fellow, what we ought to consider is not so much what people in general will say about us, but how we stand with the expert in right and wrong, the one authority who represents the actual truth. So in the first place, your proposition is not correct when you say that we should consider popular opinion in questions of what is right and honorable and good, or the opposite. Of course, one might object, all the same the people have the power to put us to death. No doubt about that, quite true, Socrates. It is a possible objection. But so far as I can see, my dear fellow, the argument which we have just been through is quite unaffected by it. At the same time, I should like you to consider whether we are still satisfied on this point, that the really important thing is not to live, but to live well. The really important thing is not to live, but to live well. Why, yes. And what to live well means? The same thing. And that to live well means the same thing as to live honorably or rightly. Yes. To live well means the same thing as to live honorably or rightly. Not richly. Yes. Then in the light of this argument, we must consider whether or not it is right for me to try to get away without an official discharge. If it turns out to be right, we must make the attempt. If not, we must let it drop. As for the considerations you raise about expense and reputation and bringing up children, I am afraid, Crito, that they represent the reflections of the ordinary public, who put people to death and would bring them back to life if they could, with equal indifference to reason. Our real duty, I fancy, since the argument leads that way, is to consider one question only, the one which we raised just now. Shall we be acting rightly in paying money and showing gratitude to these people who are going to rescue me, and escaping or arranging the escape ourselves? Or shall we really be acting wrongly in doing all this? If it becomes clear that such conduct is wrong, I cannot help thinking that the question whether we are sure to die, or to suffer by other ill effect, for that matter, if we stand our ground and take no action, ought not to weigh with us at all in comparison with the risk of doing what is wrong. I agree with what you say, Socrates, but I wish you would consider what we ought to do. Let us look at it together, my dear fellow. And if you can challenge any of my arguments, do so, and I will listen to you. But if you can't, be a good fellow and stop telling me over and over again that I ought to leave this place without official permission. I am very anxious to obtain your approval before I adopt the course which I have in mind. I don't want to act against your convictions. Now give your attention to the starting point of this inquiry. I hope that you will be satisfied with my way of stating it, and try to answer my question to the best of your judgment. Well, I will try. Do we say that one must never willingly do wrong, or does it depend upon circumstances? Is it true, as we have often agreed before, that there is no sense in which wrongdoing is good or honorable? Or have we jettisoned all our former convictions in these last few days? Can you and I at our age, Crito, have spent all these years in serious discussions without realizing that we were no better than a pair of children? Surely the truth is just what we have always said. Whatever the popular view is, and whether the alternative is pleasanter than the present one, or even harder to bear, the fact remains that to do wrong is in every sense bad and dishonorable for the person who does it. Is that our view or not? Yes, it is. Then in no circumstances must one do wrong. No. In that case, one must not even do wrong when one is wronged, which most people regard as the natural course. Apparently not. Tell me another thing, Crito. Ought one to do injuries or not? Surely not, Socrates. And tell me, is it right to do an injury in retaliation, as most people believe, or not? No, never. Because I suppose there is no difference between injuring people and wronging them. Exactly. So one ought not to return a wrong or an injury to any person, whatever the provocation is. Now be careful, Crito, that in making these single admissions you do not end by admitting something contrary to your real beliefs. I know that there are and always will be few people who think like this, and consequently, between those who do think so and those who do not, there can be no agreement on principle. They must always feel contempt when they observe one another's decisions. I want even you to consider very carefully whether you share my views and agree with me, and whether we can proceed with our discussion from the established hypothesis that it is never right to do a wrong or return a wrong or defend oneself against injury by retaliation, or whether you dissociate yourself from any share in this view as a basis for discussion. I have held it for a long time and still hold it, but if you have formed any other opinion, say so and tell me what it is. If, on the other hand, you stand by what we have said, listen to my next point. Yes, I stand by it and agree with you. Go on. Well, here is my next point, or rather question. Ought one to fulfill all one's agreements, provided that they are right, or break them? One ought to fulfill them. Then consider the logical consequence. If we leave this place without first persuading the state to let us go, are we or are we not doing an injury, and doing it in a quarter where it is least justifiable? Are we or are we not abiding by our just agreements? I can't answer your question, Socrates. I am not clear in my mind. Look at it in this way. Suppose that while we were preparing to run away from here, or however one should describe it, the laws and constitutions of Athens were to come and confront us and ask this question. Now, Socrates, what are you proposing to do? Can you deny that by this act which you are contemplating, you intend, so far as you have the power, to destroy us, the laws, and the whole state as well? Do you imagine that a city can continue to exist and not be turned upside down if the legal judgments which are pronounced in it have no force, but are nullified and destroyed by private persons? How shall we answer this question, Crito, and others of the same kind? There is much that could be said, especially by a professional advocate, to protest against the invalidation of this law which enacts that judgments once pronounced shall be binding. Shall we say, yes, I do intend to destroy the laws because the state wronged me by passing a faulty judgment at my trial? Is this to be our answer, or what? What you have just said, by all means, Socrates. Then what supposing the law say? Was there provision for this in the agreement between you and us, Socrates? Or did you undertake to abide by whatever judgment the state pronounced? If we express surprise at such language, they would probably say, Never mind our language, Socrates, but answer our question. After all, you are accustomed to the method of question and answer. Come now, what charge do you bring against us and the state, that you are trying to destroy us? Do we not give you life in the first place? Was it not through us that your father married your mother and begot you? Tell us, have you any complaint against those of us laws that deal with marriage? No, none, I should say. Well, well, I'm gonna stop there for the day.